The world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is full of interesting and colorful characters. Their personalities shine through in their fashion, deck, and playstyle. It defines them. So today, we're going to be looking at the top 10 in a specific category and place them within it in an order I see fit. This is the Duelist Alliance. Halloween is here, and what better way to spend the season than discussing the top 10 most horrifying duelists within classic Yu-Gi-Oh! A few housekeeping rules. This is just my opinion. I'm curious to see what your list looks like, so feel free to include that in the comments below. But give me just a little bit of time to state my case. With any luck, I'll be able to convince you of a few that you might not have thought about. For now, we're talking about characters who premiere in classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. This can be the anime, the manga, and supplemental material, such as the video games. I love the sequels like GX and 5Ds, but I feel like the first video of this series should stick strictly to the OG Duel Monsters series. That said, definitely expect some curveballs. For a character to qualify for this list, they must have some direct association to the game of Duel Monsters in some way, shape, or form. The world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has lots of spooky and ghoulish characters, but if they are not someone who interacts with the trading card game, then they're out of the running. Lastly, early Yu-Gi-Oh! Characters didn't really have a theme or deep strategy around their deck due to the small pool of cards that were available at the time. With 25 years of dueling innovation, I'd like to provide a handful of characters on this list with an updated deck to play with. In some examples, I'll be simply suggesting real-world cards in the modern day that are not used by other anime characters to help give these old duelists a shiny new coat of paint for their playstyle. In other situations, I'll make what-if cards. This will support their old playstyle and bring new innovation to their deck. I won't get too sweaty about the card game jargon. This is just a way to show off their personalities in new and exciting ways. With that out of the way, this is the top 10 most terrifying duelists in all of classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Number 10, Bones. This little brat is part of Bandit Keith's crew. He's the first duelist in the series to introduce the undead monster type, better known as zombies to us in the West. After luring Yugi and his friends into a secret duel arena, he takes on Joey Wheeler, showing off his powerful continuous trap, Call of the Haunted, which in the anime revives all monsters Joey defeated as undead versions of themselves. Although the real-world Call of the Haunted only brings back one monster and doesn't change its type to zombie, it's a powerful card not to be underestimated, being a staple of the game for nearly a decade since the time of its release. It's so fun seeing the undead strategy play out in the anime or manga, where we get to watch monsters of one type transform into another. It's a neat gimmick that we only really see happen with DNA surgery and Parasite. So although rare, it's fun to see it play out here. The next time we see Bones is set during Battle City in Domino City's cemetery, along with Heath's other goons. Bones and company wear zombified masks to terrify opponents looking for duels who flee in fear, dropping their locator cards in the process. Locator cards being the star chip type win currency that each duelist needs to collect in order to make it to the finals. That's when Yami Bakura shows up to take the runt on, with each of them needing to defeat the other to make it to the Battle City finals. That's when Bakura turns the spooks up to 11 and makes that match a shadow duel. Ironically, this turns the cemetery that Bones and his friends were pretending to be dead into their final resting place. Bones' dueling style is a basic one, that of summoning powerful undead cards and utilizing revival cards like the aforementioned Call of the Haunted in order to special summon them back from the graveyard easier, with the strongest monster he summons being Great Mammoth of Goldfine. Think Yugi's Mammoth Graveyard with a gold varnish and more power to boot. When I wanted to update Bones' deck to a modern playstyle, I knew two things needed to be critical in maintaining his personal dueling identity: zombie monsters and using continuous trap cards in order to summon leagues of the undead to do his bidding. Eldridge is the perfect deck for that. To keep it as simple as possible, Eldridge is an undead strategy that focuses on an insanely strong zombie monster known as Eldridge the Golden Lord, a hunk of gold with overwhelming attack power, strong effects, and more importantly an army of undead servants, all trap monsters with the zombie typing. More importantly, trap monsters are all continuous trap cards, meaning that they have a similar card design language to Bones' signature trap Call of the Haunted. In fact, the trap monsters who follow Eldridge the Golden Lord are all the villagers and conquistadors looking for El Dorado, whose greed got the better of them, which is why they're all damned to serve Bling Bling Boy over here for the rest of eternity.
Number 9, Yami Bakura. From one graveyard duelist to another, we have Yami Bakura, the evil spirit residing within the Millennium Ring held by the kind-hearted duelist Ryu Bakura. That's right, bet you didn't know that Bakura even had a first name. I think that it's no spoiler at this point, nearly 2 decades after his premiere, that Yami Bakura is the true villain of the series. His dueling style consists of demons, fiend-type monsters, all with terrifying designs including the likes of Dark Ruler Hades, or Hades in Japan, and the Dark Necrophere, who definitely is defined as the original cute goth girl in Yu-Gi-Oh! Yami Bakura's playstyle is like a haunted house, and nothing encapsulates that motif more than his combination of the Destiny board trap and spell cards, along with the corresponding field spell, Dark Sanctuary. The Ouija board spells out final in the dub, with the more terrifying message of death in the sub, acting as an Exodia-style win condition of cards, which when properly assembled leads to immediate victory for the user. But the problem with Yami Bakura is that for all of his taunting and calculating, he kind of drops the ball in execution, like all the time. Yami Bakura thinks that he's this kind of overwhelming terror, ever present and looming in the distance, like he's playing some weird solo chess game. No, he's more like a rash that isn't actually that big of an issue, but will occasionally flare up even with ointment. Am I underselling him, or is the manga simply overselling him? Let's see. In his first showing, he is defeated by Yugi and crew, where he's sent to the Graveyard of Lost Souls, being chased by Reaper of the Cards. Then, when everyone is focused on Yami and Yugi's duel against Pegasus, Yami Bakura just sneaks off. Yami Bakura uses his shadow magic to summon the real-world man-eater bug to, man-eat some men, and really asserts his terror to the audience once again, only to then be immediately knocked out by Tristan. Yami Bakura pops up again in Battle City to beat Bones, like we just discussed, the guy who lost to Joey. Then he loses to Yugi, then loses to Merrick, then the cycle continues until the end of the series, where he somehow fails forward so much that he ends up becoming the main villain of the final arc. This man has some of the most L-Riz in anime, and yet boasts about it, only second in bragging to Seto, but unlike Seto, lacks the skills to actually back it up. My feelings on the reason that people like Bakura is that he's got the potential to be scary, but lacks the follow-through. But hey, he took a bite out of that steak in 2003. That was real spooky. And suddenly, he's the edgy heartthrob of every Hot Topic-loving girl with a Shishomaru complex for decades to come. I like Yami Bakura, I really do. I absolutely love the motif of his deck. Its aesthetics are perfect for him. But under scrutiny, he does not hold up. Speaking of his cards, I would update his deck, but with the release of the real-world Dark Sanctuary field spell and retrained versions of his iconic monsters used in the anime, I feel like his aesthetics are already so well fleshed out, and it's so tied to his aced strategies that I can't really add much. That said, I would love to see him have an updated version of Zork to utilize in his playstyle. See, in the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, Yami Bakura basically takes the role of Zork in the final season. So, seeing Zork being a strategy that is incorporated into his deck would be great. We do have a version of Zork from the card game, but that card released in the early conception of the game, it's pretty underwhelming. It was designed back in like 2002, and so its effects are outdated. Running it would be nothing more than just wanting to encapsulate the character from an aesthetic motif and not a strategical one. But hey, I can already see you guys with your pitchforks and torches, so let's just move on to number 8. Number 8, Ghoul Kaiba, and the Ventriloquist of the Dead. This is a 2-for-1 deal, besties. These guys are direct anime and manga counterparts to each other. So let's start with the more well-known of the two, Ghoul Kaiba, also known as the Imitator of Death, or Mimic of Doom, the spooky fiend hired by Maximilian Pegasus himself, who pretended to be Seto Kaiba's dead soul looking for revenge against Yugi, as opposed to Seto Kaiba's living soul looking for revenge against Yugi. Fun fact that I actually didn't know about till writing this script, but in the dub, we are told that this is Kaiba's evil half, the part that Yugi used his mind crush on, which Pegasus apparently used his Millennium Eye to bring back. But in the sub, he's just some dude Pegasus paid that's like really good at impersonations. He's a master of disguise, no shadow magic required. Think a contracted shapeshifter on Maximilian's payroll, with no deeper connection to Seto other than being told, hey, act like this dude, okay? The only reason this charade starts to actually convince some of Yugi's friends that this might really be the dead soul of Kaiba is that Pegasus's goons were able to snag Kaiba's deck off of him while he was on the island. Yugi mind crushes this dude out of existence, which in the context of being Kaiba's evil half, which was revived by Pegasus, is just some sealing away the darkness good guy action. But in the new context of this just being some dude who's professionally trained to impersonate other people, that would mean, yeah, Yugi just straight up kills a whole ass dude, like, right? So why did they have a completely different guy dueling Yugi in the manga? Well, that's actually an important part of the difference in the source material compared to the anime. See, during that time in the manga, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was still finding its footing as a battle shonen specifically linked to the trading card game as we know it. For the first 40 or so manga chapters, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was focused on Yu-Gi-Moto partaking in a different game of the week, as opposed to being centralized on the Duel Monsters in-universe trading card game. In fact, the game wasn't even originally called Duel Monsters in its first appearance. It was called Magic and Wizards, and was directly inspired by Wizards of the Coast's popular Magic the Gathering card game. For the first introduction to Duel Monsters, Yugi beats Kaiba with Exodia, just like in the anime. But unlike in the anime, when Yugi decides to mind crush Kaiba, instead of supposedly purifying his heart, he straight up breaks Kaiba's brain? Yeah, Yugi, having won his duel, uses his shadow magic to put Seto Kaiba in a vegetative state. Yami Yugi does not make it on this list, but dear god, maybe he should. Anyway, the manga equivalent to Kaiba's ghoul actually does have shadow magic. He uses his powers to manipulate the real Seto Kaiba's lost soul into a ventriloquist doll, utilizing Seto's stolen cards as his own. In this way, this technically stands as Yugi's first rematch against Seto, since this is Kaiba actually dueling against him, just doing so in doll form and against his will. It's only when the ventriloquist plays Seto's second Blue Eyes White Dragon in the manga that Kaiba's soul returns to his real body. That's when Seto finally wakes from his comatose state. I think it's horrifying that this rando in a wizard hat can simply pluck the souls out of a person and use them as his own. The neat thing about this duel is that in both versions, Kaiba's dueling spirit aids Yugi to defeat his opponents. In the manga, Seto basically declares that he's the only one worthy of using the Blue Eyes White Dragon, and with Yugi rooting him on, his soul drains the attack power of that Blue Eyes. It's very JoJo in nature, almost like Kaiba is actively retracting a stand. In the anime, since Kaiba was never put into a coma, he simply hacks the duel arena to reduce the power of the Blue Eyes White Dragon from an underground bunker, weakening it for a moment and allowing Yugi to take it down. Eventually, Yugi uses Monster Reborn to bring back that defeated Blue Eyes and has Mystical Elf powered up, which is really cool because we now have a card that depicts this moment in the anime and manga that is now available for us in the trading card game. Super neat. Sure, this moment is cheating no matter how you look at it from a technical standpoint in the card game, but to be fair, Kaiba is only doing it because his cards were stolen. It's like they say, 2 wrongs make a right, or however that phrase goes. It feels a little silly to construct an alternative deck strategy for these characters since all they do is take control of someone else's deck, but for the sake of this exercise, let's give the Master Illusionist the Grey Doll cards. Basically, all you need to know about the Grey Dolls is that they are these aliens that shapeshift into more earthly looking creatures by manipulating their slime-like body, and if they get destroyed by battle or card effect, they equip themselves onto an opponent's monster and take control of it. Feels very allegorical to the slimy mutation that we see the Master of Illusions perform. Now, for the Ventriloquist of Doom, well, if you asked me this question nearly 1 year ago, I wouldn't be able to give you an easy answer. See, there's not a lot of spellcaster type monsters that match his motif that I think would be able to also encapsulate the themes of taking an opponent's cards. But with the advent of a very interesting new type brought into the trading card game, it changes things. Let me introduce you to the illusionist type monsters, previously exclusive to the manga or the video games where they were referred to as dream type monsters. In the trading card game, to simplify the concept, because there wasn't really a need to differentiate, these were lumped in with the generic theming of spellcasters, since illusion magic and spellcaster magic are basically the same in the trading card game. But funny enough, spellcaster magic or black magic in the manga actually is weak to illusionist magic, meaning that when they're divided and combating against each other, illusionist magic, the type that Pegasus uses, is actually stronger than dark magic. All this jargon to say that after nearly 30 years, we finally have this type unveiled, and with it, a illusion monster that is perfect for this. Illusionist Magician, a monster that does not destroy any card it does battle with, but instead takes control of it. So it's pretty much Grey Dolls with a silly little wizard hat, and I think that that's really fitting. It also is just really cool to have such an old character play what is essentially one of the oldest types of cards that we have yet to see. If we didn't get the illusionist type cards this year, I would have probably said gimmick puppets, but those are currently occupied by another Yu-Gi-Oh character from the Zexal series, so I'd be really at a loss. Number 7, the Ori Calos Soldiers. Let me paint a picture for you. These are mindless foot soldiers, born from the Ori Calos itself, an item created by and containing the essence of all earthly evil. These are not thinking creatures. They are not individuals. They walk the earth for one reason only, to reap the world of its life force so that it can be fed to the Ori Calos. They are horrifying creatures that were previously human themselves, mutated by the power of the seal. They just want to assimilate all life to serve the goal of their ultimate unity. The Ori Calos Soldiers only have one on-screen duel, being against Yami, but within it, we see a glimpse of just how horrifyingly powerful these creatures are. Only 2 cards are played by the soldier, the Seal of Ori Calos and Ori Calos Gigas. Have you ever played a survival horror game where you have to take on an opponent that no matter how many bullets you put in it, no matter how many attacks you do to it, no matter how many times it is downed, it gets back up, and as your resources dwindle, it just continues its pursuit of you until you can't do anything else but let it. Gigas is the closest thing to a regenerator in a survival horror game that Yu-Gi-Oh gets. It's an anime exclusive card. When Gigas is destroyed by any means, it immediately is summoned back. The player who revived it skips their next turn's draw, but it doesn't matter. See, the Ori Calos Soldier already has the only card it needs to win the duel. Gigas gains 500 attack points multiplied by the number of times that it has been revived by its own effect during the duel. It starts off weak, then, like a plague unchecked, it grows larger and larger. You try and kill it, but you just can't. It keeps coming back stronger. Even if you don't attack it, it can collide with your stronger attack position monsters, destroying them, getting the job done itself. The soldiers destroy their own Gigas simply to revive it right then and there. It will hunt you down. It will not stop. It will make you fight until you can't fight back, and then it'll take your soul. Perhaps without a soul, you'll even morph and mutate into an Ori Calos Soldier too. And then the cycle continues. Could you truly defeat an Ori Calos Soldier? Then again, it wouldn't matter. Even if you could stop one, there are thousands of them, and you will perish before they ever will. Anyway, the only thing that I would maybe add to this strategy is a spell or trap card that forces your opponent's monsters into attack mode, or at least prevents them from switching into defense mode. Cause I don't know, what's stopping you from summoning a big shield Gardna and then passing turn? But then again, if only 2 cards from the Ori Calos Soldiers deck gave you this much trouble, and the only thing preventing them from drawing more cards is Gigas' effect to revive itself, well, it's scary to think about what else is lurking in that soldier's deck. Food for thought. So number 6, Haishen or Slishen, depending on if you're playing the Dark Duelist Stories video game. I think we'll stick with the original pronunciation to avoid any confusion. Don't worry, your onset duelist dementia has not kicked in yet. Unless you grew up in the 90s, I don't really expect you to have any idea who this man is. Honestly, that's probably a blessing. See, before Yu-Gi-Oh's first official rule set in the trading card game was fully established as we know it, there was a lot of experimentation in the video game side of things. That's where that dream type came into play. This leads to some interesting attempts. I'm not gonna bore you with the rule set of the video games at this time, mostly because each one had a different rule set to begin with, but I will talk about the story behind them, starting with Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. Whereas the anime sets the story in modern day, Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories takes place during the original lifetime of the nameless pharaoh who inhabited the ancient Millennium Puzzle. It's really interesting because a lot of characters who don't have a previous incarnation of themselves like Heya and Joey in the anime and manga do have self-inserts of them in the game, but again, we're here to talk about Haishen. He's a former member of the Pharaoh's Guard, who decides to betray the pharaoh and uses the 7 Millennium items in order to bring back a terror onto this world. The card Majin, known as Darkness. Wait, sorry, I mixed that up. Known as Dark Knight. Oh, there's another? Known as Nightmare! Haishen does this so that he may become the strongest human to rule over the world, overthrowing the pharaoh with the aforementioned card Majin, Nightmare. He threatens to kill this game's version of Seto and kill anyone else that much less stands in his way in order to meet his goals. In the end, the card Majin that he sets free betrays him, trapping Haishen within a card for all eternity. Until he's not. See, Haishen somehow uncards himself and randomly appears in the GBA game Dark Duelist Stories, where as somewhat of a secret boss battle, randomly facing off against the modern day Battle City version of these characters, except there's no story mode here. He's just kind of here. He just kind of exists. He's renamed as Slishen, which I didn't really understand until I realized that he also shows up in the kind of direct sequel Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist of the Roses, where he comes back as a European War of the Roses incarnation of himself. You would have no idea who this guy here is. Just learning about him through this video, I'm sure you're extremely lost. And trust me, even as someone who has played the video games, I am too. If it weren't for these great YouTube videos about Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories and Yu-Gi-Oh! The False Bound Kingdom created by these great content creators who you should really check out out after this video, I really don't think I would know what is going on in the slightest. Haishen is just so bizarre, and the fact that his appearances are exclusively spaced between video games, all of which are on vastly different consoles, it's like a real-world creepypasta insert of a character that you made up. Like this guy is just been drowned or something. You go to a local thrift store and you see Yu-Gi-Oh! The Forbidden Memories, a game that you've never played, but hey, it's the 90s and you love Yu-Gi-Oh! So you pick it up. And then you see this random guy who's never shown up in the anime, which to be fair, a lot of these people didn't for quite some time. But then he just kind of takes over as the main boss fight of the game. And then when you think you're finally rid of him, he shows up in a completely different game. And when you try and say, who's your favorite villain? Oh yeah, I like Haishen. People in the playground look at you like you're crazy. I'm not crazy, okay? You're crazy. And I've seen so much weird stuff from this fandom, both good and bad. So just know that this guy, being part of official video games, really takes the cake. So anyway, his deck. I don't know, man. He's best known for appearing in Forbidden Memories, where all of his cards are just high attack point monsters. They include Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth, Black Skull Dragon, and during a rematch against him, Blue Eyes White Dragon and Gate Guardian get added to the mix. This all looks like trash, especially when you realize that in the real card game, a lot of these cards require really convoluted summoning methods. But remember how I said that the games at this time functioned under a different rule set? Yeah, levels don't matter. You can straight up normal summon a monster of any level in Forbidden Memories without a tribute, justifying the logic behind all those big meaty claws running around in his deck. Gate Guardian? Who needs 3 monsters to summon it? Bring that boy out. Blue Eyes White Dragon? Tribute summoned? Never heard of him. Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth? Petite Moth who, buddy? Kakuna Evolution can wipe my butt. The problem is that that doesn't apply to the real world. Now, when looking at building a new deck for Haishen, I thought that we should consider this exercise from an aesthetic approach. You know, what's a good archetype and boss monster that can stand next to Haishen in promotional art during modern day? Similar to how Dark Magician stands next to Yugi, then we'll work backwards from that angle. One thing to note is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories was released in 1999 in Japan, when volume 18 of the manga, titled Millennium Battle: The Shadow of Merrick, premiered in April 2000. That's where we first meet Ishizu, and she explains the concept of the god cards. This game, although portraying Ishizu in her past life, most likely had general notes provided by Kazuki Takahashi, the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh!, without necessarily having further details fleshed out. The god cards might have already been designed in concept within the real world, but not in gameplay, and at this point the games were basically making up their own story anyway. That said, let's say in an updated version of this game, which would portray the real rule set of Yu-Gi-Oh!, the god cards are a thing, and with the Sun God, the Winged Dragon of Ra, being thematically the strongest of the 3 god cards, it only makes sense that if Haishen was trying to take the Pharaoh's power for his own, that he would emulate Ra's power to the best that his magic would allow. For a modern deck, I would focus on the Egyptian theming, and the fact that Haishen's got a bit of an affinity for big dragons and powerful monsters. In the real trading card game, there is currently a deck with monsters akin to the Sphere mode and true dragon form of the Winged Dragon of Ra, known as the Heretic or Heretic Dragon. I think that that name is super fitting for Haishen, especially because they can utilize and special summon any big strong dragon that Haishen wants, which can be paired with a more modern evolution of the Red Eyes Black Dragon, Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon, which could be a great allegory for the fact that Haishen also uses Red Eyes Skull Dragon. This lets him continue his theming of using Red Eyes themed and Blue Eyes themed cards while still keeping his own individual identity separate of Joey and Kaiba. Lastly, the ace monster of the Herotic Dragon archetype is known as Herotic Dragon of Atum, which just so happens to be the forgotten true name of a not so specific ancient Egyptian pharaoh. So, I don't know, using the real pharaoh's name for your false prophet is a pretty neat scheme I could definitely see someone like Haishen pulling in order to trick the masses to worship him. It's not like people from the town over know what the pharaoh looks like. If you told me that this giant golden dragon was my pharaoh, I'd probably believe you. What are they gonna do? Google it? They ain't got Google. Shoot, maybe like Ask Jeeves or something. I'm so happy to say we've reached the halfway point of our top 10 list. But to make sure this video got out on time for Halloween, I needed to split it into 2 parts. But once the second half is done, it'll be uploaded and put in a playlist with this video so you can watch them back to back. I wanted to make sure it was completely finished by the time the holiday rolled around, but unfortunately work got the better of me and I hadn't been able to finish everything I needed. Anyway, enough excuses for now. I hope to have the future content out very shortly. Definitely less long than what it takes to make an average episode of my live action web series. Once the video is out, if part 2 of the video doesn't start autoplaying, I have a playlist set up for it, so just click on that and you'll be good to go. Till then, it's your move.